Facebook, YouTube, we back at it again, man. This I Standard LLC. We got another conversation that we got to have on today. A conversation that is one that is special. The conversation today is around autism. And many of you may know, and some of you may not know, that the month of April, in addition to it being month of the military child, is also Autism Awareness Month. And so I have a guest with me who has real life experience as it relates to autism and raising a son, a beautiful son, a special young man who has autism. And so if you're watching on YouTube, Facebook, please hit like, hit share. If you're on YouTube, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification, hit like and share, and we're going to dive into the conversation. I'm going to let my guest introduce herself. I'm not going to take her thunder away from her. I'm going to let her introduce herself. And so one thing I'm going to get to it. I'm going to let her introduce herself, and then I'm going to say something about my experience with working with young people who are on the spectrum, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So without further ado, Rugenia, introduce yourself to the world.
Hello, everyone. My name is Rugenia Speight-Dennis. I am a wife and I am a mother of 2 boys. My eldest is 19 and he has autism. And we have made it a mission to not let autism define him. And we strive for people to see him for who he is. He's graduated high school and he's currently in college. He wants to become a cartographer. And so it was a long road. We're still working. We still have a journey to go, but we are determined. He's determined. As long as he's determined, I am.
Listen, I like what you said. And, I'm one that I do not like labels. I understand that we, sometimes we have to label things, right? But I just do not like labels because I feel like labels box individuals in. It provides a framework of bias, prejudices, assumptions about an individual before someone can even get to know individual. And I like what you said about you as a family did not allow autism to define your son. And so I'm so grateful and so thankful that you stepped out to do this interview. I'm thankful that you were a yes to doing this interview because I think a lot of people don't understand autism. They don't understand the spectrum, which has Asperger's on it as well. I have always been one who was big on community resources in my work. I worked in the social service field, and how I stumbled upon gaining interest in helping young people with autism. I was working as a probation officer in a particular state, and we had a young person who assaulted a worker, and it wasn't the young person's fault, right? And so we had to assess the situation and like, okay, could there have something we could have done different? And so I began to look in the community, looking for resources to bring back to the agency to help us be better officers to serve our community. And I ran across this agency that specialized in ABA, Applied Behavior Analysis. And I befriended the owner and I told her what the mission was. And she was able to come in and train staff on how to understand autism, how to look at the signs when the sensory is overloading, how to engage so that we can serve better. And I have always been an advocate for young people, not only those with autism, but those who have the variety of mental health diagnoses, whether it be bipolar, schizophrenia, ADHD. I have always advocated. That has been my life work, is to advocate for young people and take the judgmental lens off of young people. And so I'm glad we're having this conversation around autism because I think so many times young people with autism are misunderstood, are labeled as being aggressive, when it's something that we just don't understand about the diagnosis, right? And so I'm so glad to be able to pick your brain as someone who has lived experience in what it's like to raise a young person from birth to where you have your son now, seeing the success that he has. There's so many parents that are going to be encouraged, so many community partners that are going to be encouraged, so many community workers, social service workers that are going to be encouraged by what you're going to share with us today. So, my question to you,
Mhm.
Regina, starting back at birth, starting back at when the diagnosis came, how did you feel when your son was first given the diagnosis of having autism?
I was devastated. I at first I felt bad as a mother because I did not. I've heard of autism. I have a friend who raised her nephew, um, who has autism, who's actually a professional jazz performer. And I came across a young lady when I was over at the youth group when we were stationed at Hanscom Air Force Base. She had autism, but I really didn't know it. I just kind of knew how to deal with this young lady, but I didn't know what it truly meant. Her mom would share certain stories about we couldn't find her doll. And because her doll was misplaced, the whole house was in an uproar. And until they were able to find that doll, she wouldn't be calm. She would, that was her comfort. That was her security. And so they literally had to tear a house apart to find this doll to calm her down. But I still didn't know. And I was disappointed in myself that I didn't know the signs at first. I found out initially how it all started was when my son turned 2 years old. I took him for his annual physical, well child visit that you do every, you have certain milestones. And when I had to fill out the questionnaire, there was a section on language. And, they wanted to know approximately like, how many words the child spoke and this and that and the other. And I wrote down when I thought about it, my son could name things, like he knew his alphabet very early. It wasn't just a memorization. He could point out the letter A and said, that's an A, it makes this sound. He knew his colors. He knew he had a lot of academic skills at an early age, but he didn't have any social skills. There was no conversation. If a children's song came on, he would sing the lyrics. But as far as he and I having a conversation, we didn't do that. And I'm just thinking, okay, my son is just brilliant. I didn't see the lack of socialization. So when I wrote down what he could do, it was a red flag to the pediatrician. And so she referred us, at that time we were living in Alabama, and she referred us to Child Find. And because we lived off base, then they referred us to the civilian one. And the person called and asked me some questions. She said, well, he's still young. He's just 2. She said, we could come out and evaluate him now. Or if you want to give it some time, because, sometimes boys often develop, later than girls. If you want to give it some time and call us back, you can do that. And I said, well, I'll do that. I'll hold off a little bit. Meanwhile, my son and I were currently in a Mommy and Me music class. Mm-hmm. And he always, would participate and sing songs. But I started to notice little ones that were younger than him talking with their mom. And I noticed their interaction versus our interaction. So it was about 6 months had passed, and I called and I said, look, I want him evaluated. I've noticed how kids younger than him have more verbal skills than my son.
So Can I stop you? Can I stop you right here? And the reason why I want to stop you right there is because I want to reinforce something in you as a mom.
Okay.
I want to thank you for being attentive. I want to thank you for paying attention and caring enough and being present enough to pay attention to your son. Because sometimes we get so caught up in life, we can put things on the back burner. And I'm also grateful that you sought out the community partnerships. You talked about, and a lot of people don't understand you have a military background, and so the way that worked with TRICARE, you have to get a referral from
Mm-hmm.
the on base physician in order to receive access to care outside of
Mm-hmm.
the installation. And so I'm glad you were able to find a provider for your son at an early age that was willing, right, to do the assessment, because a lot of times politics is involved in all of that, right? And
Yes.
so I just want to reinforce your strength, because I know having this conversation is not easy because we're taking you back in time, and it
Mm-hmm.
may spark some emotion. So I wanted to take this moment to reinforce your strength and let you
Thank
know how strong you showed up in that moment.
you. Mhm. Okay. And so they sent someone out to evaluate him, and he was first diagnosed with severe speech delay. And so, because he was under the age of 3, he followed under the state. And so the state sent someone out twice a week to work with him on his speech and language. And after a few sessions, the speech therapist, she said, I'm going to put in for him for more evaluation. And so I questioned her and I said, well, what is it? She said, well, I'm not liberty to say because this is out of my realm, and that's out of my professional statute, and I'm not at liberty to say. And I just kept pushing and pushing. So she talked very vaguely and said, well, I see, signs of maybe pervasive developmental disorder. She wouldn't say what she thought. She just kind of talked around. So I kept that in the back of my head, and as soon as she left, I went online to see what that was.
Right.
And with that, I saw autism, and I saw the criteria. And I knew prior to him getting a physical diagnosis that pit was in my stomach. My son has autism, because it had things. Go ahead.
And,
Mhm.
and I want to apologize for stopping you,
No,
but
no, 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 no. There's
I
no
want to,
problem.
I want to, I want to, I want to do this for the other parents, the other family members, the other people that will see this. Tell me about that pit in your stomach. Tell me about that.
I was, I was. All my hopes and dreams just kind of left. It was just. I thought, and at that time, I thought, my son, was brilliant. I mean, he is brilliant. Don't
Yes.
get me wrong, but at that time, because I've had other people see. I remember friends had come to town that were military, and we had dinner, and the husband had noticed my son, and he's like, "Your son is a genius," So in my mind, being that academically he was ahead of the curve for his age, it just never socialization. It never registered, and it's just like one of the criteria is lining things up. My son lined things up, but I just thought, okay, he's just very detailed. He's very structured. He's very organized. He's going to be a neat freak. And, that's it. Um, and then it said, um, you know, um, sensory issues, noises, along the line. And then I thought about it. I reflected. There were times when I would leave, I could come out of a store and have them in the basket. And, sometimes depending on the asphalt or the parking lot, how bumpy it is, it could vibrate, and he would cover his ears. And as whereas it was nothing to me, I never saw that sensitivity that something else could be wrong neurologically. I'm like, okay, well, he just doesn't like to vibrate. There are a lot of things I wrote off that I did not know. Walking on his toes, he did it, wasn't all the time, but it was sometimes. But he did toe walk, and that is a red flag. And so I'm thinking, okay, okay, I see the writing is on the wall, but I'm going to be in denial until I get the final word. But I know what they're going to tell me. I'm going to prepare myself, but I'm going to hope for the best. And so I will never forget the day, September 23rd, 2005. The psychologist came down from Birmingham and evaluated our son at our house. And at the end, she said, it's going to be a couple weeks before I write up the report. But I have to tell you, your son has autism. But it is not the end of the world.
Now I want to stop you right there. I
Mm-hmm.
want to stop you right there because I felt a little something myself.
Mm-hmm.
I felt a little something in my heart. And I want to just stop because I know it's probably some other parent out there who got that same information, whether it was about autism or any diagnosis or anything that was just like contrary to what it is that you wanted to believe. And it's okay to have your emotions, to sit with your emotions because your emotions are real, right? Of course, we don't stay stuck in that place, but your emotions are real. So I can't even imagine what you and your husband were going through at that time when that psychologist released that information.
Yeah, it was devastating. I had a friend from college. I had shared the diagnosis, and the first thing he said, I will never forget this. Is your husband okay?
Mm.
Because as a man, he has two boys as well, and for a man to find out his son is quote unquote less than is devastating. And I never thought of it in that. So, I'm thinking, okay, I'm mama and I'm devastated and I'm mourning because it is a loss. You do have to mourn. There are some things now, my son is 19. There are certain things that I still mourn. It is a process, Um, it's a death to preconceived life thoughts that I have for my son,
Got it.
but it is also a rebirth of what can be, or what
Nah,
is
hold up,
possible.
hold up. We got to stop right there. Now you said a whole mouthful. That was a whole nugget. It was a whole nugget. So it sounded like you had to do some internal work here, right? Because like any parent, you have this thing like, hey, I'm married, I'm with my husband, I'm with my wife or whatever. We're gonna birth beautiful children. This is how we're gonna raise our children. This is the expectation for our children. And then when something like this happens, you're saying to me, you have to die in a sense to those specific dreams
Mhm.
and you rebirth something totally different. Talk to me about that rebirthing, right? That switch your pathway from, okay, so these are the dreams I had if it was this situation. But I'm not going to stop dreaming because it sounds like you didn't stop dreaming. You just had a rebirth, right? And you started to dream with your son differently. Talk to me about that.
I had decided that I was just going to do whatever I can, whatever I could will for my son, whatever work I had to do, whatever money I had to spend. I was going to do whatever I could do to quote unquote cure my child because
Mm,
part of me, I'm going to be transparent, part of me felt guilty.
mm, mm.
And the reason I felt guilty because, and excuse me for getting a little emotional, but I lost my mother when I was pregnant with my son,
Mhm.
and that was devastating. And when I was pregnant, I developed anxiety. I had gone home for my 20th, no, my 10-year class reunion, and I spent time with my mom, and I knew my mom had health issues. I literally got back from Florida. Back at that time, we were in Massachusetts. When I got back to Boston, and I started having anxiety and I started having panic attacks.
Mm.
It was debilitating. And here I am. I'm pregnant. I'm carrying another life,
Yeah.
and I'm having a mental, I'm having a mental breakdown. I couldn't go anywhere. I couldn't do anything. It's the hormones. What is it? And I remember talking to my mom one day, and she told me, "You're afraid I'm going to die."
Mm.
And you're dealing with mentally losing me. And my anxiety got to be so debilitating that I had to be on medication.
Wow.
I didn't want to. I fought it. I fought it for months. And it got to the point, okay, I got to do something because I got to function. I'm bringing life into this world.
Right.
Literally. And they told me, okay, it's going to take 4 to 6 weeks, for you to start feeling better. I broke down. I started the 1st of September
Mm-hmm.
of 2002, I remember. I started taking the medication. 2 weeks later, my mother calls me and says, I don't want to worry you, but I'm having some exploratory surgery. Can you come down?
Okay.
Fortunately, within that 2 week time frame, the medicine kicked in. Whereas they told me 4 to 6 weeks, I was functionable. I was
Yeah.
able to get on that plane and I got down there. And then my mom proceeds to tell me that, okay, yeah, I said it was exploratory surgery, but I'm having heart valve replacement surgery. And she did not make it. And so I go down thinking, for something minor, and I lose my mother.
Wow.
And so when I say I felt guilty, being on medication, I wonder, if I had handled that better and I didn't have to be on medication, would my son be, in a better situation? And then I also taught, I go back to what my mother said, you're afraid I'm going to die. And I think I, I previously grieved because literally 2 months after my mother passed away, my son was born.
Wow.
And so, there's a lot of things I've come to accept that, I had to go through that. I had to go through that emotional mental breakdown ahead of time because God knew that you're going to lose your mother and you're going to give birth to this child, and you need to be able to function. You had to be able to handle her affairs. You had to be able to, and then get back home in time, to have your son, new time mother, and so on and so forth. And so going back to, the diagnosis, and when I found I did feel guilt that maybe if I wasn't on medication, because that was the time when, I don't know if you remember all those commercials. If you were on Prozac, or if you were on Paxil, if you were on Zoloft, if you were on this, and your child has this, and autism was one of the list,
Wow.
call this number.
Wow.
And so these commercials happened to be going on around the time that I had this diagnosis.
Let
And
me
so,
say this. Let me say this right here, just
mhm,
to lift up your strength and your resolve. Right. I mean, it sounds like you had a lot going on at the moment,
I did, yeah.
but it sounds like that you learned some valuable lessons in the midst of it all that prepared you to be able to give your all to your son. And I mean, you showed great resolve, great strength, even in the midst of a time where you could have broke down. I mean, it could have took you 10 months to recover, but like you said, in 2 months after that, you are giving birth to a
Mhm.
beautiful creation.
Yes.
And so I just want to lift that up because I can only imagine you thinking that it's your fault. What if I wouldn't have took that medicine, and this and that? I'm sure that plays in your psyche over and over again. But I want to reinforce the strength, right? To just show you that as a mother, you're all of what your son needed and even more. And so I just want to lift that up and thank you for giving your all to your son and continuing to this day to give your all to your son. Thank you.
Mhm. And so that has been one of my driving forces for doing whatever I can, doing, because I would spend nights just online, looking up stuff, finding whatever. I will admit I've been one of those parents. Okay, you say this will work, I'm gonna try this, and I'm gonna try that, and I'm gonna try the other. And some things made an improvement, some things were, because there are a lot of businesses, I'll say,
Right.
that take advantage of parents like me.
Mm. Right.
because you want your son to be quote unquote typical,
Mhm.
normal.
Right.
And normal is that's subjective.
It
Typical
is
is subjective.
very, very, very.
But you want your child to be perfect, and there are predators. So parents, you have to be aware of predatory behavior when it comes to treatments.
Thank you so much for pointing that out and lifting that up for other parents, right? Because that's why you're here because you're the expert at this. You're not the only expert, but you are one of the experts as a parent to be able to share this. So let me ask you this question, right?
Mhm.
You can, I mean, you got 19 years of situations to look at, but tell me about some of those high moments and some of those low moments. We want to know the balance, right? Tell me about
Mhm.
some of those high moments. You kind of mentioned like, man, my son is a genius. Tell me what those high moments look like, and tell me what those moments was just like. I need another strategy. What
Mhm.
did that look like for you and your family?
Mhm. It was this journey has taught me to appreciate the small things. I remember when my child called me mommy and really meant mommy and knew what that was. Because kids, they babble and most times they say dada. That's always typically the first sounds they make. But to go years, well, I 3 years and not being called mommy. And it wasn't until we moved to Florida and he started ABA, which you mentioned earlier, and he only had very limited hours because where we were stationed in Florida, there was only one ABA provider in a 200-mile radius. So he never got what is recommended as far as therapy, in spite of what the textbook or specialists has said. He never, they recommend, 40 hours, of ABA, and they recommend this. We haven't always been blessed to live in areas where he could get that.
Right.
And when he finally said, mommy, he was only getting at first 2 hours a week because we were on a waiting list. And it was like, okay, somebody canceled. You want to come in? And I'll come in, and I would come in, I would drop whatever was done, and I would come in and get those 2 hours. And he wasn't even at that point, he wasn't even getting 10 hours a week. But she taught him um, how to say mommy. And that was one of the greatest gifts. And that was because my child said mommy. It wasn't just an echolalia. It wasn't just something he heard.
Yeah.
For him to say, okay, I know who you are, but now I can say who you are and mean who you are. So that was a high, for me, that was a big deal. Um, to see my child, in in spite of him being different from other children, that because he has this pure light and this joy about him, that other kids would draw to him. And fortunately, we've never had to deal with bullying.
Oh, amen.
And to see children, his peers accept him when he was growing up, that is that is a big deal. That is a
Big,
high in itself to be
big.
accepted.
Yes.
We still have, there's still, he still communicates on Facebook. It might be a like or, a thumbs up, but there are still friends of his from elementary school. And he's 19. And that was three, four assignments ago.
Oh, right.
And they still keep in touch. They still want to know how he's doing. It did not matter that he couldn't talk. It did not matter that he had a personality that everybody wanted to be around him
Yeah.
and that they were loved. And that was important. I wanted him to have some sense of normalcy, some sense of of social life. It's much more difficult now. Oh, I apologize.
That's all right. That's all right.
My alarm went off.
This
Excuse
is
me.
real life. We're in real life here, y'all.
Okay, but so that is a high. Uh, my son is a bowler,
Mm,
and my son bowled varsity high school, and that is a big deal.
big deal.
That is a big deal that he made the varsity team and bowled well and held his own. Sometimes he was the anchor, and I don't know if you know much about bowling,
No.
but to be able to be the anchor is a big deal because the anchor holds it together. Um, in bowling, in high school competition, and
Man.
in college, you have what's called Baker style. Well, you'll have 5 kids bowling. The first person that bowl, and then they switch to the second frame is the anchor does the fifth and the 10th, and that the anchor can make or break that
Got it.
game.
Got it. Got it.
And there have been times where he has been the anchor. He
Amazing.
has done traveling league bowling with other typical kids.
Nice.
He's done scholarship league bowling, and he has won that tournament a couple of times.
Amazing.
So and there are some areas where he has deficit, but there are some areas where he excels, and he's just like anybody else. That was the one thing when he found a passion for bowling.
Yeah.
I'm like, okay, how do I want to say, this is our normal. He's just like anybody else.
In that space.
And he's just like, any other kid. We've come across coaches at other schools, and they'll come up to me. I remember when you guys moved here. I've seen the growth in him, in your son. He's doing so well, to see him improve, throughout, the years. And on top of that, he was been able to bowl exceptional with typical peers, but he's also gold medalist in bowling in the state of Maryland for Special Olympics.
Nice. 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 And I've done volunteer work. I was in Germany, and I had the opportunity to volunteer at one of the Special Olympics activities that they did on base for all the young people. And it's just, so much talent, so many gifts, again, that we overlook, that we kind of write off as society because, quote unquote, they're not normal. But what is normal? Like
Yes.
you said, it's objective. What is typical? I mean, so we have to start thinking different, understanding different, and just educating ourselves. And that's what we're getting here today. We're getting education on how we can understand if we see a young person in public that is having a sensory overload, right? We can understand what that is and respond correctly to it. My wife was telling me earlier about one of her coworkers, her old supervisor, old leader that she had. She has a son with autism, and times she would have to lay on him in public because he had that overload moment, and
Yeah.
people would think she was abusing them or they were fighting, but it's just what comes with the territory. It's the understanding of the parent. And I think as a community, the more we educate ourselves, the better off we can be, the better off we can serve. Now, you talked about some of the highs. I want to hear about some of them challenging moments, and I want you to, if you can, wrap that in the sacrifices that you made as an individual, as Rugenia, as Johnny, to make sure that your son had all he needed. Because you mentioned earlier, you was like, listen, I don't care how much money it took. I don't care how much energy it took. I was going to do what it took to make sure my son had an opportunity. So talk to me about some of them trying times and the sacrifices that you made for your son to now be a college student.
I gave up me. I gave up my life for my son. You know, Children don't ask to come in this world. We bring them in here. So it's our responsibility to rear them, take care of them, nurture them. And so in the process, I became him. I know that might sound, odd, but we just became joined at the hip. I just, I just became intuitive that I could, before he could utter whatever it is, I knew what it was. It just, that just became my life. Autism became my life. And it's not easy because a lot of things suffer with that. At that time, I didn't care. I'm just going to be honest. The most important thing for me was making my son, quote unquote, better, giving him every opportunity. So there were, some things, that suffered, having outside relationships and socialization. Um, at that time, it didn't matter because I was focused on my son and we were in this bubble, and I felt like no one else is really going to understand. So we just going to be, you know, prior to my youngest son being born, we were just going to be, it was just us against the world. It didn't matter if people came or go, we were a military family anyway. So every few years we're going to move. It just didn't matter. Every time we relocated, okay, I found out what is here, what resources. I just got involved in that, and nothing else really mattered. And in that, I lost myself in that. Um, Gained very few friends and associates because my focus was on my son 24/7. It can be a strain on the marriage because I'm so focused on my son. I do have a husband, fortunately my husband is understood, and he was in the trenches with me. But there are times where it's like, okay, I exist too.
Right. I want to stop you right there. I want to stop you right there, and
Mhm.
I want to thank you. I want to thank your husband.
Mhm.
Um, your sacrifice that you made that was so difficult,
Mhm.
and I'm sure you're so thankful that you were able to make the sacrifice and still survive.
Yes.
What would you say to the parents out there that may be single, that maybe do not have the luxury to make the sacrifice you made? What kind of encouragement would you share with them?
Know that uh, you can do it. It's going to take an extra pair of hands for you to do it, but you can still do it. And to create your own village. That is something I did not do. And I'm going to be honest. I did not create my own village. I was just going to become Superwoman, and I was going to do it all by myself. You
Mm-hmm.
know, I didn't trust, because our children, um, who are on the spectrum are very vulnerable, and you're very overprotective,
Yes.
especially when they have limited verbal skills, because they can't tell you oftentimes if someone mistreats them or does something wrong. And so the single parent who's doing this on this journey by themselves, do your best to create a village of people you can trust. Someone, even if they I can't be there to physically help you, find someone that could be a sounding board, that sometimes you just need to emotionally dump on someone, and you get overwhelmed. Find that person that you can, talk about it, because sometimes, when you don't know what to do, sometimes talking it out, you can come up with your own strategies will come.
Yeah. Let me ask you this right here for those who, when they hear that word, create your own village. Like, I understand what
Mhm.
that means, and it was so amazing, so enriching to hear you say that. What did that look like for you, and how did you come up with your village?
That's something I didn't do. I did not. I didn't create a village in the typical sense when we think of creating a village. Um, and if I had to do it over again, I would have. As I reflect, and I'm looking at, okay, what could I do different, and what could I do to help parents that are going through this journey? My village, everywhere we live, my village happened to be my son's therapist.
Mm,
And those are the people that I would talk to because I knew they were the ones that understood
right.
and they had empathy and they were a sounding board and they could shed light on things that I didn't understand. And so I had created a professional village
Okay.
for my son. But what I fell short in was creating an emotional and a social village for
Got it.
us.
Got it.
And it is important to do that because you have to have that balance.
Wow.
And I have had to learn that some help is better than no help
Okay.
because truth be told, no one can do it like I can. And I'm sure every parent feels that way, that no one can do it as well as I can.
Yeah.
And have to be able to accept, okay, this person only has this much capability. Their comprehension and their understanding of their situation may only be this much. But if that much can give you a break for 15 minutes or an hour so you can run an errand
Yes.
and you structure things and put things in place so that okay, I just need a moment. I just need a moment to decompress, even if just to go to coffee. Can you watch my child? I have this laid out. If this happens, I have all this in that create and but I know this person doesn't quite understand, but they have a willing heart and they have a willingness to help and support me. Take advantage of that support.
I hear you loud and clear. Create your support system that you can lean on. Times have changed drastically, tremendously. There's so many respite opportunities through service providers that families can lean on. Like you said, to get a breather, to just go get some coffee. I remember when we were on bases, they would have give parents a break through
Mm,
the
mm,
CDC, and to just go drop the baby off in a safe environment. If it was only for 2 hours, 3 hours,
yes, yeah,
you know what I mean? That was an amazing feat.
yes.
That was an amazing journey to be able to do that. So listen, Roger, loud and clear, please, those who are listening, create you a village and utilize your village. Do not be afraid to lean and depend on those that you can trust to support you. So you don't feel alone, so you don't feel like you're isolated and you got to do everything on your own.
Mhm. And get involved in support groups because there are so many parents that are in your situation, but you don't know because you may not cross paths. But even if it's virtually, because you learn a lot bouncing ideas off from other parents, things that you never thought about, techniques. Just someone who's going through the same struggle as you, being tired, burnout, frustrated. That helps too. Finding people that are walking in your shoes, and that is important as well.
Another question I got for you, and I mean, you've done amazingly. We're at 43 minutes in, and it doesn't even feel like it. Um,
Okay.
was there ever a time that you felt like giving up?
Yes.
What did that look like and feel like?
Am I? Do I want more than my son is capable of? There are times where I would reflect: is it something he wants, or is it what I want?
Mm,
And am I making it about me and not him?
mm. Wow, interesting.
And so it is important to find your child's voice, however he or she is able to express their wants and their desire. And then you, as a parent, nurture and encourage their voice, their
Yes,
purpose.
yes,
Because it is easy to get caught up in the status quo, trying to make them fit in the box of what is normal.
yes, yes.
And I know I've been guilty of that because you want your child to be just like any other child. But know your child's capabilities, know their I don't want to say weaknesses or deficiencies because I don't want to put a negative
Right.
tone on it, but things that they need to improve on and things that they need to enhance and help bring that out and learn to be able to be okay with if they're happy,
Yeah.
then you be happy. They may not reach what you want them to reach or what you envision, but if that child has reached the potential, what if their desires say they may just have desire that they want to say work at a veterinarian's office because they love puppies
Mm-hmm.
and they want to be, but you may not, you may want them to do something else. But if that brings them joy and that brings them content and they are proud of who they are and what they're doing, then you help them be the best vet tech there is.
Yeah.
It is, I have to be mindful, there are things that I want for my son, but I have to take into account what he wants and then find the balance. Okay. This is, and then also having to, it's very hard to tell your child, no, you can't do.
Mm.
And you know, things can always change. You
Yeah.
never want to say never.
Right.
But if you look at it just from a face value standpoint, there are some things that your child will not be able to do.
Right.
But you never want to discourage your child
At all.
at all. You never want them to ever believe that they can't, even when other people say that they can't. For instance, when we were stationed at our assignment prior to this one, the staff at the school where he attended wanted to take him off a high school diploma track and put him on a certificate of completion.
Mm.
And I knew if we had stayed there, I loved the area. I really wanted to be there, but I knew I was going to have the fight of my life because in their mind, he didn't have what it takes to get a high school diploma. And I'm sure there are also other political factors that probably take in account. Schools look at test scores, they look at this and they look at that. And if they can weed you out so
Yep.
that they look a certain way, they're going to weed you out.
Absolutely.
Or if it costs too much, if the resources cost too much and they can find a way to, you know, not incur those costs, they will do that. And as much as I liked where we lived before and wanted to be there, it was best that we were relocated to a place where that was one less battle that I had to fight.
Right.
And the school district that he was in did not believe in just because a child has this exceptionality,
Right.
that they weren't worthy of a high school diploma and that there is more than one way to achieve that goal.
Yep.
And because they saw other practices as discriminatory.
Absolutely.
And my son was able to achieve his dream of graduating high school and going to college, in spite of what other people said, other places we lived. When he was in elementary school, I never forget. Um, he had a teacher that did not want him in her class. She did not. She did not want him. Everyone else loved him. The kids loved him. She did not like him being in her class. And an advocate told me once, You have to be mindful. There are instructors that are that way. And if they wanted to teach special ed, they would have become a special ed teacher. And that's something that comes with the territory. But fortunately, the administrators were able to buffer some of her actions. And, he made it through and went on to the next grade.
And I want to
Mhm.
say this to all parents that have, you know, children, pupils that may have some sort of gift that is different from mainstream, that you have to engage with administrations differently. Go to bat for your child,
Yeah.
your son, your daughter. Fight, advocate till you have nothing left. Do not allow systems that we know are biased, prejudice, set up a certain way, dictate outcomes for our children.
Mm-hmm.
Fight and advocate just like Rugenia did. Because what if she would have gave in and said, you know what, I'm not fighting. Put him on the certificate track. But look where he's at now. Graduated high school and is college. That is because of you, mom. That is because of your insight. That is because of your belief in what you've seen in your son.
Mm-hmm.
For other parents out there that are listening, watching, pay attention to your children. Pay attention to their strengths. Know what it is that they can accomplish. You know that as a parent. And you push everybody around them. Like, no, this is what I know my son can
Mm-hmm.
accomplish, my daughter can accomplish based on what I see day to day. And so you guys got to make adjustments to fit that, not him or her make adjustments to fit your system.
Mm-hmm.
So my next question, and we're getting close to closing.
Mm-hmm.
What is the moment? And I know you talked about you had to differentiate what you wanted versus what he wanted, right? Because that's how we are as parents. And it's
Mm-hmm.
not only for your son, it's for every parent with any child. It's like, sometimes we push our children to do more what we want to do, how we want to see them, and what they want to do. It's hard when they don't go the direction that we feel like they should go in. It's hard. But we have to do right by them. And like you said, give them a voice, a seat at their own table of life. Um, what is one thing you're most proud of looking back?
Of myself or my son or both?
A combination.
I'm proud of myself for never giving up and how I have approached different situations. One thing that has worked for me is that when I come across professionals and staff, when I need resources or help from my son, I've always come in with the mindset that we're a team. And what can I do to help you? And what can you do? How can we work together?
Yeah.
I have seen parents that have come in there, they just want to drop the hammer down. And it caused the reverse action. There are times where you have to, be aggressive and you have to be assertive.
Mm-hmm.
But I've been able to navigate the waters and not create enemies, because some organizations, some schools, if you don't approach them the right way, or you just come barking or making demands, yes, you want what is required by law. You want your
Right.
child to have the free and appropriate education
Right.
that is required. But attitude does make a difference,
Yeah.
I you and it has worked that I have never allowed situations to get me out of my character, and it has worked out for the benefit of my son, because I never wanted to allow me to impede on what I can give for my son.
Got it.
And sometimes as parents, and our overzealousness and wanted to help our child sometimes, because it can backfire. So know how to navigate and balance advocating and creating a teamwork, a network
Yeah.
versus, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. You're going to, because it ends up being a war and the child loses in the end.
Yeah.
As far as my son, I'm very proud of his resilience and his determination because I believe that is what is keeping him going. There are things that he wants that he's not going to give up on, and he's going to perseverate on it, and he's not going to let it go. And I have to kind of tweak it. Well, no, you can't. I don't like to say no, you can't. For instance, I'm going to give an example because it is a flat out no. There's nothing I can do to change it. It is what it is. Because of the nature of his disability, he can't go in the military. That's
Right.
what he really wants. His dad's Air Force. He wants to be Air Force.
Yeah.
That's one thing I can't fix. And I have to explain to him, no, son, you can't do this. But what you can do
Yeah.
is we can work towards getting a job on the base. So you can still work for the Air Force. You can still support the mission. You can still be a part of the military, just not in uniform, but on the civilian side.
Good for you. Good for you.
And so he's, yeah, he's, so I have to be creative. And so he's determined. So he's like, okay, yeah, I'm still part of the Air Force. I said it, and you're a military brat. You still Air Force. You still Air Force. No, you may not put the uniform on, but there are other things that you can still do and be part of the Air Force. So his determination, although sometimes, those on the spectrum can perseverate, they have kind of obsessive tendencies. Although it can be aggravating, it has been to his benefit because he never gives up. And I'm proud of his tenacity. And I'm proud that in spite of, it does not stop him from trying. And I love that about him. He sees the world as beautiful and nice and sweet, although the world is harsh. But his view and his world view is so pure. And I pray that nothing changes his positive outlook.
Right.
He has this light that just draws people. He may not be able to hold a conversation with you, but if you get around, you just fall in love with him. He just has that magnetic personality that I'm proud of. I'm just really proud of him.
Amazing.
We still have a long way to go, but as long as he's determined, I'm determined. And yes.
Well, Rugenia, man, this has been an amazing interview, and
Thank you.
we didn't even tap the barrel, but
I know.
I feel
We
like
have to do this again. We have
yeah,
to.
yeah. I feel like so many people were informed, though. So many people were educated. So many people are now enlightened with just a dose of understanding that they did not have before you sat beside me and had this conversation and shared this information. But in closing, I want you to say one thing to that family, to that parent, to that child, even, right? That whatever you want to share to the those that are listening, those that are tuning in, this is your opportunity to inspire.
Do not give up. Parents, your child was uniquely and divinely made. We are all different. We all have some type of quirk. And we do, There, some is just more magnified in it, this person versus that person. But never give up. Find All of our children are exceptional. You find that exceptionality in your child and you hone in on that child's exceptionality to help bring out the best in that child. Yes, it can be trying, it is tiring sometimes, but never give up and always let that child know that you are proud of him or her in spite of every milestone, whether it's learning how to tie a shoe, whether it's learning how to get home, from the bus stop or what have you. You celebrate all these individual milestones and let them know, hey, okay, you did this, now you can do that. And never shortchange your child. Never think, they can only do this because my son oftentimes surprises me. Your child will oftentimes surprises you. My son is teaching me how to do access. and databases. I've touched on it, but he's in a software class and he's teaching me
Nice.
the ins and out things I never even done. So never discount your child's abilities.
Amazing. Amazing.
Never do that, because when you shortchange them, you shortchange yourself as a parent, because you're responsible for bringing out the best in your child. And know that you are a special parent. You're a special person yourself, because you have been gifted with an exceptional child, and to never forget that, even when times get tough.
Listen, I'm leaving here motivated myself. I'm gonna go give my baby boy a hug and pulling me in tight. I'm inspired. Thank you, Rugenia. I
Thank
know
you.
this was not easy. You know, to be able to have this conversation and talk about your son and the highs and the lows. But again, so many people are informed now. So many people have a different point of view because of the information that you willingly shared. And I'm sure it was a moment of vulnerability for you to come here and share that, give us an inside look into your world, into your life. So again, thank you. Thank your husband, right? Thank you both for never giving up and making the sacrifices that were necessary, not only to raise your older son, but also your younger son, moving around as a military member from place to place. And you mentioned still tapping into the services. Listen, that is not easy. I'm telling you, it's not easy. And what you have been able to do is remarkable.
Thank you.
You have to share that blueprint with other families. Let this be the beginning of many beginnings of you sharing, because so many families need that blueprint of how you were able to persevere, how you were able to remain strong, how you were able to keep a smile on your face, even when you felt sad on the inside. People need to hear your story, because it's going to make them better, and it's going to make the world a better place. The more we are informed, the more we're educated, the better we can do, and the better we can treat each other. So thank you. Thank your family for allowing you the space to spend an hour on this platform. We appreciate the interview. Listen, y'all, please hit like, hit share. Go tell everybody about this interview. Tell your therapist, tell your social workers, tell your case manager friends, everybody you know, to come watch this video. The principal at the high school, your son, daughter, teacher, tell them to watch this video so they can get some act right and a little bit of understanding. Listen, it's the end of the show. We gotta go. You ain't gotta. You can't stay here. You gotta go somewhere. You gotta get somewhere. So it's all over. And thank you again, Rugenia. Hey
Thank
y'all.
you so much for having me.
You're welcome.
Okay. Bye bye.